Before you drive down Archer Avenue after midnight, there is one story every local thinks they already know. A girl in a white dress stands in the rain near Resurrection Cemetery. She asks for a ride home. She sits quietly in the back seat. Then, just as the cemetery gates appear, she disappears. Most people call her a legend. But Daniel Tran learned that some legends are not trying to scare you. They are trying to make you stop. Resurrection Catholic Cemetery is located at 7201 Archer Road in Justice, Illinois. Consecrated in 1904, it spans approximately 397 acres and is the final resting place for over 225,000 people, according to Catholic Cemeteries Chicago. The most famous legend here is that of Resurrection Mary, a young woman dressed in white who is often said to appear on Archer Avenue, hitch a ride, and then vanish near Resurrection Cemetery. Nobody in Chicago is truly afraid of winter. They are used to it. They are used to wind that cuts across the face like a dull blade. They are used to thin ice shining on the asphalt under yellow streetlights. They are used to leaving home before sunrise and coming back after the city has gone quiet, as if some enormous machine has finally powered down. But people who live on the southwest side of Chicago know a different kind of fear. Not snow. Not black ice. Not the distant scream of an ambulance cutting through the night. A road. Archer Avenue. Especially the stretch that runs through Justice, Illinois, near Resurrection Cemetery. People say that if you drive that road too late at night, you may see a girl standing on the shoulder. A white dress. Pale blonde hair. A thin shawl around her shoulders. Shoes that look as if they were meant for an old dance hall, not a lonely road in the rain. She does not wave her arms. She does not scream. She does not look lost in the ordinary way. She simply waits, watching each passing car as though she has been waiting for a very long time. If you stop, she will ask for a ride. If you ask where she wants to go, she will answer in a soft voice. Please take me home. And when your car reaches the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, she will vanish from the back seat. People have told that story for decades. They call her Resurrection Mary. Before that night, I thought she was just something old men talked about in bars when the weather was bad and the lights were low. Then I became the man who opened his car door for her. My name is Daniel Tran. I am 36 years old, and I drive nights. It is not the life I imagined, but it is the life that keeps the bills from swallowing me whole. During the day, I work in the warehouse of a small pharmacy in Bridgeport. At night, I drive for a nap. Every evening, I tell myself I will take only 3 more rides and then go home. Then I look at rent, my mother's medication, and my daughter's school expenses, and I tap accept one more time. Life gives you plenty of reasons not to believe in ghosts. The living can exhaust you enough. That Friday night, cold rain had been falling since late afternoon. Not a hard rain, the worst kind. A thin, patient rain that seems harmless until it soaks through your collar, your sleeves, and finally your bones. A little after 11:30, I dropped off a drunk passenger in front of a bar in Summit. I was about to log off when my phone buzzed. New ride request. Pickup, near Archer Avenue. Destination, Justice. The pay was good. I looked at the map for a few seconds. The route would take me past Resurrection Cemetery. For no good reason, I hesitated. A childhood memory rose out of nowhere. I was 10 years old, sitting in the back of my father's taxi while he smoked by the curb. He had told me, "After midnight, don't drive Archer unless you have to." I asked him why. He looked at me through the cigarette smoke and said, "Some people ask for rides because they want to go somewhere. Others ask because they want to see who will stop." At 10, I thought my father was just drunk and talking nonsense. For years, I still thought that. Then came the night that changed everything. I accepted the ride. 12 minutes later, I turned onto a narrow road where the streetlights thinned and the trees bent over the pavement in the rain. My windshield wipers moved back and forth with a slow, steady rhythm, like the breathing of someone asleep. The pickup point was near an empty lot. No open stores. No lit houses. No person waiting under a sign. I slowed down. Nobody was there. I was about to call the passenger when the app displayed a message. "Passenger has arrived." I frowned and looked around again. Then someone knocked on the rear window. My heart jerked in my chest. A young woman stood beside the car. I had no idea where she had come from. She wore an old-fashioned white dress that fell to her calves. A cream-colored shawl lay across her shoulders, wet with rain. Her pale blonde hair clung to both sides of her face. One hand held a small purse against her chest. The other rested gently on the glass. She did not look like someone coming home from a party. She looked like someone who had stepped out of an old photograph. I lowered the window a few inches. "Did you call a ride?" I asked. She leaned down and looked at me. Her eyes were pale blue. "Beautiful. And empty." "Can you take me home?" she asked. Her voice was soft and hoarse, as if it had traveled through wet cloth. I glanced at the app. The passenger name showed only one letter. "Sure," I said. "Get in. It's freezing out there." She opened the rear door. Cold air rushed into the car. Not normal cold. Not winter rain cold. It felt like the breath from a room sealed shut for many years. She sat behind the passenger seat, perfectly upright, knees together, hands resting on the little purse. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You want the address in the app, right?" She did not answer at once. Her eyes stayed on the dark road ahead. After a long moment, she said, "Just keep driving on Archer." I forced a polite smile. "The app says Justice." More specifically, I looked down at the screen. The destination had changed. It no longer showed a house. It showed an address. 7201 Archer Road. Resurrection Cemetery. I swallowed. I tried to laugh it off. "You're going to a cemetery at this hour?" The girl did not look at me. "No," she said. "I'm going home." The car went quiet. I thought about asking another question, but I had learned something from years of driving strangers at night. You do not ask too much. Some passengers get into your car after a fight. Some after a 12-hour shift. Some only want a place to cry where no one knows their name. And sometimes a girl in a white dress gets into your car and asks to go to a cemetery. Better to drive. So I drove. Archer Avenue stretched ahead of us, wet and shining under dim lamps. The rain tapped at the windows. The trees along the road looked skeletal when my headlights swept over them, their branches reaching out like thin arms. I kept glancing at her in the mirror. She sat perfectly still. No phone. No shiver. No white breath in the cold air, though the temperature inside the car had dropped so far that my fingers ached around the wheel. "Were you at a party?" I asked. She slowly turned her head. "What?" "Your dress. It looks like something for a dance." She looked down at the white fabric as if she had only just remembered wearing it. "Yes," she said. "I was dancing." "Where?" A long silence followed. Then she said, "Oh, Henry." My hands tightened on the wheel. I knew the name. Not because I had ever been there, because anyone who grew up near Chicago long enough had heard about the old dance hall on Archer Avenue. Some called it the O. Henry Ballroom. Some called it Willowbrook Ballroom. And in the Resurrection Mary legend, it was the place where a girl in a white dress had danced before dying on her way home. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe she liked vintage clothes. Maybe she was an actress. Maybe she was messing with me. Before I could ask anything else, she spoke again. "Do you believe a person can get lost on the same road for almost a century?" I looked at her in the mirror. "What do you mean?" "Some roads don't take people anywhere," she said. "They only bring them back to the moment they want to forget." I turned the heat higher. Warm air blasted through the vents, but the cold from the back seat kept crawling up my neck. Then my phone lost service. The map froze. The location arrow sat pinned to Archer Avenue like a nail driven into glass. Just then, the girl asked, "Do you have a daughter?" I flinched. "Yes." "How old is she?" 11. "What's her name?" I did not want to answer. Somehow I did. "Lily." The girl gave the faintest smile. "You should go home to her early tonight." A chill moved through me. "Do you know me?" She turned her face toward the mirror. For the first time I saw her clearly. Her skin was bloodless. Her lips were blue from cold. Beneath her wet hair, at her right temple, a dark mark ran down her neck. It looked like dried blood. I blinked. The mark was gone. She was only a sad, pale young woman in the back seat again. "No," she said. "But the people who stop for me usually have something they have not said to someone they love." I slammed the brakes. The car slid on the wet pavement. "Who are you?" I demanded. She faced forward. "You're almost there." Ahead of us, the gates of Resurrection Cemetery appeared through the rain. Black iron gates. A long fence stretching into darkness on both sides. Behind it, rows of headstones faded in the rain, low crosses and gray shapes rising out of the grass. Farther back, the mausoleum stood like a heavy shadow. I pulled to the shoulder. My headlights struck the gates. "We're here," I said. No answer. I turned around. The back seat was empty. The door was still locked. The seat belt had never been pulled. There were no wet footprints, no little purse, no girl in a white dress. Only a small patch of rainwater on the seat, so cold that when I touched it, my fingertips went numb as if I had pressed them against ice. Then I saw the rear window. Fog had gathered on the glass, forming words. Not written by a finger. It looked breathed from the outside in. "Don't let him drive tonight." I sat frozen. A second later, my phone regained service. The app chimed. Trip completed. The payment had gone through. The passenger name was no longer M. It had changed to Mary. I did not sleep that night. When I got home, I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour with my hands still shaking. I tried to explain everything. Maybe she had opened the door and jumped out when I wasn't looking. Impossible. The child lock was still on. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe the message on the glass was a prank. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I had dozed off for a few seconds and dreamed the whole thing. The next morning, I took the car to be washed. The worker called me over. "Man, your back seat smells strange." "What kind of strange?" He wrinkled his nose. "Old flowers. Like a funeral home." That night, I decided not to drive. But the more I tried to ignore her, the more I thought about her. I searched the name online. Resurrection Mary. Hundreds of results appeared. A girl in white, blonde hair, a ride request, a disappearance near Resurrection Cemetery. Some said she had died after leaving a dance. Some said she was struck by a car on Archer Avenue. Some named her Mary Bregovy. Others said Anna Norcus or Maria. No one knew for sure. But everyone agreed on the same shape of the story. Since the 1930s, people claimed they had picked her up. Others claimed they saw her cross the road. Some swore they hit her with their cars, only to step outside and find no body. I read about the handprints once reported on the cemetery fence. Then I closed the laptop. Folklore was one thing. Folklore did not know my daughter's name. The next evening, my mother called. Her voice sounded weaker than usual. "Daniel, are you driving tonight?" I paused. "Probably." "Why?" A silence came through the phone. Then she asked, "Will you be on Archer?" I sat up. "Why are you asking me that?" "Answer me." "Maybe, if I get a ride there." My mother's breathing changed. "Don't go." "What do you know about Archer?" She stayed quiet for so long that I could hear the clock ticking on her kitchen wall. Finally, she said, "Your father once picked up a girl there." My throat tightened. "Dad." "A long time ago, before you were born." "He told you?" "Not all of it, but after that night, he was never the same man." I sat on the edge of my bed. My father had died 8 years earlier from a stroke. Bao Tran had been a taxi driver most of his life, then a night security guard. He was quiet, sad-eyed, and easily startled by the sound of tires screeching outside. When I was a kid, I thought he was strict. When I grew up, I thought he had too many fears. Now I wondered whether he had only one. "Mom," I said, "what did he see?" She answered in a whisper. "He said the girl was not asking for a ride home." "What did she want?" My mother's voice broke. "She wanted the driver to remember." "Remember what?" She did not answer. She only said, "If you see her again, don't ask who she is." "Why?" "Because she will ask you the same question." Then she hung up. I did not want to be involved in this. I truly did not. I had rent to pay, a daughter I saw on weekends, and a mother with a weak heart living alone. I did not have time to hunt ghosts. I did not want to become a weird story on the internet. But life does not let go of people who have been chosen. 3 nights later, I was finishing a ride in Oaklawn when the app turned itself on. I had not accepted anything. The screen showed a pickup point. Archer Avenue. Passenger name, Mary. I pulled into a gas station, closed the app, and shut off the car. The screen stayed lit. Passenger waiting. I held the phone's power button. It would not turn off. Outside, the gas station lights began to flicker. From a speaker mounted on a pump, old music crackled into the air. A slow dance tune, thin and warped, like it was playing from a radio built before my father was born. I looked up. Across the street, under a yellow light, the girl in the white dress stood watching me. No wave, no step toward me, just stillness. I opened my car door and shouted, "What do you want?" She tilted her head. Then she raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned. A pickup truck was barreling into the gas station. The driver had collapsed over the wheel. I jumped out seconds before the truck slammed into the rear of my car and shoved it sideways into the next pump. Metal screamed. Glass burst. I hit the wet concrete hard. If I had still been in the driver's seat, I would have died. People ran out of the store. The pickup driver had suffered a heart attack, but he lived. So did I. When police asked why I had left my car at the exact right second, I did not know what to say. I looked across the street. The girl was gone. Only one small female footprint remained on the wet pavement, pointing toward Archer Avenue. That night, I did not go home. I drove my damaged car to my mother's apartment. She opened the door, saw my face, and said nothing. On the kitchen table, she had placed an old tin box. I recognized it. My father's cigarette tin. My mother sat down and folded her hands together. "It is time you knew." I looked at the box. "What did you hide in there?" "I didn't hide it. Your father made me promise." "Promise what?" "That if you never saw that girl, I would never tell you." I opened the tin. Inside were several old photographs, a yellowed newspaper clipping, a tarnished taxi key, and a folded piece of paper. I picked up the clipping. It was not about Resurrection Mary. It was about an accident. 1987. A taxi driver on Archer Avenue claimed he had struck a girl in a white dress. But when police arrived, there was no body. The driver's name was Bao Tran. My father. My hands went cold. Dad hit her? My mother shook her head. He thought he did. After that night, she began appearing to him. Not once. Many times. Why? My mother looked down at one of the photographs. It showed my father as a young man beside an old yellow taxi. Next to him stood an older American man in a long coat, his face partly washed out by sunlight. She pointed to him. "Because your father was not alone that night." "Who is he?" "Harold Whitman, your father's taxi company boss." I had never heard the name. "Was he rich?" "Rich, connected, protected by lawyers." She closed her eyes. That night Harold was drunk. But he did not want anyone to know. He made your father drive him home, then forced him to switch seats with him near Archer. Later, the report listed your father because the taxi belonged to the company. Harold disappeared from the story. So Dad was forced to take the blame? It was worse than that. Her voice trembled. Your father said they truly hit someone that night. The room seemed to tilt. But the article said there was no body. Because the person they hit was not the girl in white. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside the window, wind whistled through the frame. My mother continued. After the car struck something, Harold dragged your father out to look. They found a young woman lying beside the road. She was not wearing white. She wore a red coat, and she was still breathing. What happened? I asked, though I already knew I did not want the answer. Harold did not call for help. I could barely speak. Mom! He said if they called police, both of them would go to prison. He told your father no one would believe an immigrant taxi driver. He said the girl was already dead. Then he forced your father to help drag her past the trees near the cemetery. Dad did that. Tears fell from my mother's eyes. Your father was a coward that night, and he carried that cowardice until the day he died. I stood up. No, Dad wouldn't have. Every night, he heard someone knocking. My mother said, not Mary. The girl in the red coat. Old memories came back to me with a new shape. My father sitting on the balcony until dawn. his hands shaking around a glass of water. His sudden jolts awake in the middle of the night, whispering in Vietnamese, "Stop knocking. I hear you." I had thought those were nightmares. They were confessions. What was her name? I asked. My mother unfolded the yellowed paper. A name was written by hand. Eleanor Blake. Below it was an old address in Willow Springs. "Your father found out later," she said. Eleanor went missing that same night. 22 years old. A new elementary school teacher. Her family searched for years. I stared at the name. What does Mary have to do with it? My mother wiped her face. "Your father said that after they dragged Eleanor toward the trees, a girl in a white dress stood across the road watching them. She said nothing. She only watched. Harold thought she was alive and ran after her. She vanished in front of the cemetery gate. Mary had seen everything, and after that, she never let my father forget. I drove to Archer Avenue the next morning. Not at night. I was not brave enough for that. My car was being repaired after the crash, so I borrowed a friend's. I drove slowly past the gates of Resurrection Cemetery, past the empty stretches of road, past the trees that lined the shoulder. In daylight, the place did not look like a legend. The cemetery was wide, quiet, and clean. People came to visit graves, leave flowers, pray, and drive away. Cars passed. The winter light was pale but honest. There was no white dress, no ghost. Only a heaviness I could not name, as if too many untold stories were lying under that peaceful ground. I went to the local library and asked for newspaper records from 1987. The librarian was an older woman named Margaret. When I said the name Eleanor Blake, her hands stopped moving. "Are you family?" she asked. "No, I'm looking into an old case." She studied me for longer than she needed to. "Old things around Archer don't stay quiet," she said. "I need to know what happened to her." Margaret led me to the microfilm reader and helped me search through old reports. Eleanor Blake. Missing on November 14, 1987. Last seen leaving a fundraiser at a small hall near Willow Springs. Her car had broken down earlier that day, and she planned to call a taxi home because of the rain. No one ever saw her again. A week later, her family put her photograph all over Archer Avenue. A month later, the case went cold. A year later, her mother died. No body. No grave. No goodbye. I read until my eyes burned. Margaret stood behind me and said, her family thought she had been kidnapped, but her father didn't. He always said Eleanor was still somewhere near Resurrection. Why? Because the night she disappeared, a man called their house. He never gave his name. He only cried and said he was sorry. I knew who the caller was. My father. Margaret placed a photocopied photograph on the table. This is Eleanor. I looked down. A young woman with brown hair smiled in front of an elementary school classroom. She did not look like Mary. No white dress. No cold beauty. No mystery. Just an ordinary young woman who had gotten into the wrong taxi on a rainy night. I left the library at dusk. As I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No name. Only one line. Tonight he drives again. I called back. The number did not exist. I stood in the wind and stared at the message. My father was dead. If Harold Whitman was still alive, he had to be very old. I searched his name. Harold Whitman. Former taxi company owner. Later real estate investor. Still alive. 91 years old. Living in a private senior residence in Burr Ridge. A local society article said his family was holding a birthday dinner for him that weekend at a restaurant near Willow Springs. I looked at the date. Tonight. The restaurant was close to Archer Avenue. I did not know what I intended to do. Call the police and tell them a ghost named Mary had warned me that a man who covered up a crime 39 years ago was going to drive again? Tell them my dead father helped hide a missing woman? I had no proof. Only an old tin box, a handwritten name, and my mother's story. But there was one thing I had not checked. The taxi key. I went back to my mother and asked about it. She said that, after the accident, my father refused to drive that cab again. Harold had it moved to an old company storage building. Years later, when the company sold off its property, my father kept the key like a punishment he could hold in his hand. Does that storage place still exist? I asked. I don't know, she said, but your father may have written the address somewhere. We searched his old drawers and found a black notebook. The first pages were ordinary. Gas costs, repairs, fares. The final pages were not. One sentence appeared over and over in my father's handwriting. I should have stopped him. On the last page, he had written an address. A deserted warehouse in Summit, not far from Archer Avenue. I arrived there at 8 that night. Rain was falling again. The warehouse stood behind a row of closed shops, its metal door rusted, its sign almost unreadable. I shined my flashlight through a crack. Darkness. I do not know why the key made me believe the taxi would still be there, but when I forced open a side door and stepped inside, I found it. An old yellow cab under a tarp. Dust lay over it like ash. I pulled the tarp away. The car emerged in my flashlight beam. The plate was faded. A crack ran across the windshield. The right side of the front bumper was crushed inward. Nearly 40 years had passed. It was still there. Like an old animal locked in a room with the sin of its owner. I opened the cab with my father's key. Inside, it smelled of rotted leather, stale gasoline, and the sweet sick smell of dead flowers. I checked the front seat. Nothing. The glove box, an old insurance card, receipts, a book of matches. Then I opened the trunk. My flashlight swept over the ruined lining. In one corner, under the mat, was a black plastic bag hardened by time. I pulled it out. Inside were a dark red scarf, a woman's shoe, and a small brown leather wallet. Not Mary's purse. This was Eleanor's. Inside were an old student ID, a few coins, and a classroom photograph. Name on the ID: Eleanor Blake. I sank down onto the warehouse floor. My whole body shook. This was proof, not only of the crash, of the cover-up. Why had Harold kept these things? To make sure no one found them? Or for some reason even worse? I tried to call 911. No signal. The warehouse lights flickered. Then I heard music. The same old dance tune came from inside the taxi. The radio, dead for decades, glowed with a faint green light. I stepped back. From the back seat, a woman's voice said, "You found her." I turned. Mary was sitting there. White dress, thin shawl, a face as sad as the first night I saw her. "Why me?" I asked. "Because your father stopped for me." "Did you want revenge on him?" "No," she said. "The dead don't need revenge. Only the living need the truth." "Why didn't you tell the police yourself?" A faint smile touched her mouth. "Do you think I never tried?" Outside, a car pulled up. Headlights shone through the cracked warehouse door. I shut off my flashlight and hid behind the taxi. The warehouse door opened. Two men came in. One was middle-aged, wearing a dark suit. The other was very old, seated in a motorized wheelchair. Harold Whitman. Even at 91, I recognized him from the old photograph. Thin skin, deep-set eyes, a face folded in on itself but still cruelly awake. The man in the suit said, "Are you sure you want to see it tonight?" Harold wheezed. "Once a year. Your family is waiting at the restaurant. Let them wait." The man pushed Harold closer to the old taxi. I held my breath. Harold stared at the car for a long time. Then he laughed softly. Bao kept the key, but he never knew I had a spare. I clutched Eleanor's wallet in my hand. The man in the suit asked, "Do you still dream about that girl?" Harold turned his head sharply. "Which girl?" "The one in the red coat." Harold went quiet. Then he said, "No, I dream about the one in the white dress." The air in the warehouse dropped cold. Mary was still in the back seat, but the men did not see her. Harold reached out with a trembling hand and touched the dented front of the cab. That night, if the girl in red had not come out of nowhere, everything would have been different. The suited man sighed. "Grandfather!" "She ran into the road," Harold snapped. Bao panicked. I told him to keep going, but the fool stopped. When I got out, she was still breathing. She looked right at me. You know what she said? His mouth curled. She said, "Call my mother." He gave a dry laugh. I hated that sentence. I bit down hard. Mary looked at me. Her eyes were calm, as if she had heard this confession 1,000 times. Harold continued. Then the other girl appeared. The white dress, standing by the cemetery gate. I thought she was a witness. I ran after her. She vanished. When I came back, Bao was crying like a woman. The suited man lowered his voice. "Enough. We should leave." "No," Harold said. "I want to drive." "You can't drive anymore." I said I want to drive. The man hesitated. Then he opened the taxi door. Somehow, the old cab started when Harold turned his spare key. The engine coughed like something dead waking up. Black smoke poured from the exhaust. Harold dragged himself from the wheelchair into the driver's seat. The man in the suit stood outside in panic. "This is insane." Harold smiled. "She'll be on the road tonight. I know she will. She comes every year. But this time I won't break." The taxi roared. The warehouse door stood open. I ran out and shouted, "Stop!" Harold saw me through the cracked windshield. For 1 second, his eyes widened. Maybe my face looked too much like my father's when he was young. "Bao," he whispered. I raised Eleanor's wallet. "It's over." Harold stared at the wallet. His face twisted. Not because he feared the police, because he feared the thing sitting in the back seat. Mary. This time he saw her. I knew it because he began to shake. Mary leaned forward behind him and whispered into his ear, "You have driven long enough." Harold screamed. The taxi shot out of the warehouse. I jumped aside as the taxi tore past me and turned toward Archer Avenue. I shouted at the suited man, "Call the police!" Then I ran to my borrowed car and followed. Archer Avenue that night did not feel like a road in the living world. Rain dragged across the windshield. Streetlights stretched into long yellow scars. Ahead, the old taxi swerved from lane to lane, impossible and fast. I called 911 on speaker. This time, the call went through. I gave the location, the situation, everything I could say without sounding insane. Then I saw a white shape on the shoulder ahead. Mary. She stood in the rain before the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. The taxi did not slow down. I heard Harold screaming. He pressed the gas. The cab lunged straight at the girl in the white dress. In the instant the headlights touched her, Mary did not move. She only turned her head toward me and smiled. The taxi passed through her. Then it stopped as if it had struck an invisible wall. The rear end whipped sideways. The tires screamed over wet pavement. The cab slammed into the cemetery fence with a terrible metallic crash. I braked hard and stopped several yards away. I ran into the rain. The taxi was jammed into the iron fence. The front was crushed. Smoke rose from the engine. Harold was still alive. He was pinned behind the steering wheel, eyes wide behind shattered glass. I tried the door. It would not open. He looked at me and moved his lips. I leaned closer. "Where is she?" he whispered. "Mary." He shook his head in terror. "No, the red one." I turned. Inside the cemetery fence, beneath the trembling headlights, a young woman stood among the graves. Not Mary. She wore a red coat, brown hair dark with rain. One foot wore a shoe. The other was bare. Eleanor Blake. I do not know whether I was seeing a ghost, a hallucination, or a truth buried too long finally taking shape. Eleanor looked at Harold. Not with rage. Not with screaming. Only with sadness. Harold began to cry. "I'm sorry," he wheezed. "I'm sorry." Eleanor stepped closer to the fence. Mary appeared beside her. The two women stood together. One in white, one in red. Two deaths on the same road. One became a legend. One was erased from the story. Sirens approached from far away. Harold grabbed my hand. His fingers were ice cold. "Tell her I didn't mean to." I looked at him. "You meant to leave her there." His eyes dimmed. A second later, Harold Whitman died. When I looked back, Mary and Eleanor were gone. Only two misty handprints remained on the iron fence beside the impact scar. The police found everything in the warehouse. Eleanor's wallet. The shoe. The red scarf. Pieces of old paperwork Harold had hidden for decades. Most important, they found a small tape recorder inside the taxi. Harold had once used it to record business calls. Somehow, it still held part of the tape from the night in 1987. On the recording, there was rain, a breaking sound. My father sobbing. Harold shouting. And a weak young woman's voice saying, "Please call my mother." Eleanor Blake's case was finally closed after almost 40 years. They found her remains in a wooded area near the cemetery, exactly where Harold had hidden her. My father, Bautran, was no longer alive to face judgment. But his name entered the file as an accomplice who helped conceal the accident. I read the news article again and again. Each time it hurt. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to forgive him. But some sins do not disappear because the sinner is dead. They simply pass to the living like a heavy suitcase left at the door. I told my mother everything. She sat quietly for a long time. Then she said, "At least she finally went home." I did not know whether she meant Eleanor or Mary, maybe both. 1 week later, I brought Lily to visit her grandmother. My daughter asked why my eyes looked sad. I told her, "Because your dad learned something very late." "What?" I looked at her small face. "If someone needs help, you stop. But if you do something wrong, you also have to stop long enough to tell the truth." Lily did not understand all of it. She only hugged me. For the first time in years, I cried. I stopped driving nights. At least that is what I told everyone. There is one thing I have never told anyone. 3 months after Harold died, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was an old photograph. A dance hall. Probably from the 1930s. In the center of a blurred crowd, a girl in a white dress stood with her back to the camera. Beside her was a young man in a dark suit. His face had been scratched out. On the back of the photograph, someone had written one sentence: "Thank you for stopping." I kept the picture in my drawer. I thought it was over. Then last night, I drove home after visiting my mother. I was not working. I was not carrying a passenger. It was an ordinary night. An accident blocked my usual route, and my GPS suggested another way: Archer Avenue. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I laughed at myself. A road is only a road. The dead had been found. The truth had been spoken. There was no reason to be afraid. I turned onto Archer. Rain began to fall, very lightly. The streetlights covered the pavement in a tired yellow glow. As I neared Resurrection Cemetery, I saw someone standing on the shoulder, a girl in a white dress. I hit the brakes. She turned. It was not Mary. It was not Eleanor. This girl was younger. Black hair, brown eyes, a face so familiar that my heart seemed to stop. I opened my door and stepped into the rain. Lily, my daughter, stood there in the white dress she had once worn for a school performance. But Lily was at home with her mother. I had spoken to her 10 minutes earlier. "Lily," I shouted. The girl looked at me and shook her head. Not my daughter. Only her face, a few years older than I had ever seen it. A version of her future. The girl pointed behind me. I turned. A truck was coming fast. Its headlights swayed. The driver was asleep, or drunk, or lost in some private darkness. My car was half on the shoulder and half in the lane. If I had still been inside, the truck would have crushed the driver's seat. I leaped back as the truck tore past and smashed into my car, spinning it across the road. Metal burst open in the night. I fell onto the wet grass. When I looked up, the girl with Lily's face stood before the cemetery gate. Mary stood beside her. So did Eleanor. The three of them looked at me. Then the girl with my daughter's face said, "This time you stopped." I blinked. They were gone. Police arrived 10 minutes later. The truck driver lived. I walked away with scratches. No one understood how I had gotten out of the car in time. I did not explain. But while I sat in the ambulance, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily. "Dad, are you okay? I just had a bad dream. I saw a girl in a white dress telling me to call you." I looked toward the gates of Resurrection Cemetery. The rain had stopped. The black iron fence stood still in the dark. For one brief second, I saw an old yellow taxi moving slowly along Archer Avenue. No one was in the driver's seat. In the back seat sat two girls, one in white, one in red. They did not look at me. They looked down the road ahead, where the city lights faded into mist. The taxi passed the cemetery gates. Then it vanished. Since then, whenever someone asks whether I believe Resurrection Mary is real, I do not answer right away. I ask them one question. If you saw a girl standing on the side of the road after midnight, asking for a ride, would you stop? Most people laugh. They say of course they would not. They say they are not stupid. They say no one picks up strangers anymore. I laugh with them, but inside I always think the same thing. Maybe Mary is not looking for brave people. Maybe she is not even looking for good people. Maybe she is looking for people moving too fast past guilt, regret, and the things they should have done but did not. And if one night she stands by the road and looks at you, maybe she does not need a ride at all. Maybe she only wants to know whether you are willing to stop. If this story made you look twice at an empty road, follow the channel for more true place horror stories, urban legends, and mysteries that refuse to stay buried. And tonight, if you pass a lonely cemetery road and see someone waiting in the rain, ask yourself one question before you drive on. What if she is not asking for a ride, but giving you one last chance to stop?